It is Authentic in front. 'Tis the law, final try. Authentic was always in front, and he wins the Derby.
Courtland Simmons with you here at the CS Racing Report with the kind of more of a added post podcast for the Kentucky Derby, chiming in on all of the so-called viewpoints of why or how Authentic won this Kentucky Derby. It's interesting because going into this, everybody thought, that 'Tis the Law was unbeatable and he lost. And since that loss, there's been a lot of interesting reasons, very similar as to why he won this Kentucky Derby, as if he didn't deserve to win or he was a lucky winner of the Derby, however you want to categorize it. One of the things I want to touch on is the pace. In comparison to the year in which everybody talked about this incredible depth, which was overrated to begin with, in 2015, the year American Pharoah won the Derby and would go on to win the Triple Crown. And Dortmund, another Bob Baffert trainee in there with American Pharoah, got, as you can see, a pretty easy, he walked the dog in the first half mile. He wasn't being breathed on, and he got a pretty reasonable pace, and the fractions were slow in a race in which, in the end, American Pharoah didn't run anywhere near the type of dynamic race that he ran in the Arkansas Derby that made him the prohibitive favorite. Had to be hit 32 times by Victor Espinoza in the stretch to win that race. And when you look at the final splits in comparison to what Authentic did, when you look at the early fractions that we talked about in the post pod, 22.92 for the quarter, a half and 46.41, 3/4 and 110.23, and then the mile 135.02, numbers that are way better than Dortmund, numbers that should have had him finish off the board for everybody who thought he couldn't go a distance. Look at the final splits. When you look at Dortmund's numbers versus what you see with Authentic, 24.79, 25.59 to finish up. So they weren't significantly better than Dortmund. But when you look at the first 3/4 to a mile of the Kentucky Derby, significantly better, which of course ends up translating to part and parcel of the 2-minute .61 time versus the 2:03.02 in Pharoah's victory in 2015. So that's just something to look at from a statistical standpoint. Not saying Authentic is American Pharoah, but he certainly ran better than he did in the rest of the group that day on Derby Day 2020. And the most interesting thing that everyone's talked about as to why Authentic won this race was because King Guillermo and Art Collector weren't in the race. Now, before the Kentucky Derby gates opened, nobody thought Authentic could go 10 furlongs, and we knew King Guillermo and Art Collector weren't in the race. Authentic beats 'Tis the Law. Now the narrative is, well, Art Collector and King Guillermo weren't in there to give him pace pressure, and that's why he won. Well, I'll tell you what, it may have cooked all three of these horses, but no one can say that Authentic walked the dog and got an easy pace to win this race. And I think it's a little bit of a stretch, sort of delusional and somewhat distorted to say, well, these defections are the reason why he won. This is part and parcel of the Derby and Triple Crown Trail. If you look at the horses over the years from Buddha, Cahill Road, a lot of Wood Memorial winners, by the way, that missed the Kentucky Derby. I Want Revenge, the day of the Derby, had to be scratched. AP Indy, Santa Anita Derby winner, the second straight Santa Anita Derby winner to be scratched the morning of the race, the morning of the Derby with the foot bruise. Of course, he would go on to great things. So it happens. And so for people to say that, no one was saying before the gates opened these defections were going to immensely help Authentic coming out of the 18. If anything, everybody thought that he was going to be used up coming from the far outside, but he proved, like Big Brown winning out of the 20, that you can win, from the widest part of the racetrack and tuck yourself in. Of course, there wasn't an auxiliary gate, but still he's out in the 18 hole, and he was able to get over, and Johnny Velasquez did a great job in managing his speed in this race. And so I just find it kind of interesting, almost comical, why, Authentic won this race. Every reason in the book has been thrown out as to how he won the Kentucky Derby except for one, and that is he outran everybody else, including 'Tis the Law, to win the race. He was just the fastest horse. Now, when we get to the Preakness, which we'll preview in the coming days, we'll find out should Art Collector run. Looks like King Guillermo is doubtful to participate, where, all of this is going to stack up. That's more legitimate if, in fact, these horses make it to the starting gate as to the effect of who is going to affect, what horse is going to affect the other in the early going of the Preakness. And we'll see if Authentic ends up letting someone else go out and get crazy on the front end and rate, which would be an added asset for him if he's not being restrained and he isn't fighting that, or if he does go out and show his natural speed, ends up on the lead, and if he gets a little bit of pace pressure. We're going to find that out in the Preakness, but, it's non persona non grata and irrelevant when it comes to the Derby. In the meantime, the word on authentic, or the question would be, in closing, would be, and I will say before making that question or asking that question is, he certainly is no mind that bird or Giacomo, a 50-1 shot that won this Derby. He was 8-1 going in, considered to be a prohibitive underdog, but he had been 4 for 5 in his career, so his resume in comparison to the aforementioned 50-1 long shot winner is pretty good. Now the question will be down the road, will he end up being a horse that has moderate, if no success, like a Monarchos or a Lily T? Will he end up being a horse that has a little more success than War Emblem and Funny Side, horses that really didn't do as much after the Derby? Go for Gin could fall into that category. Animal Kingdom, Orb. They just weren't able to duplicate, or they certainly, even if they did come close to their Derby performance or surpass it, they were beaten by better horses in the end. Will he be a horse that tails off like Nyquist? And certainly, last but not least, probably one of the sorriest Derby winners in terms of falling completely off of form on that day is Always Dreaming 3 years ago in 2017. Will he end up being in a casualty like that, or will he end up being one of those Derby winners like an Ali Sheba, an American Pharaoh? Number of Derby winners that gone on, Silver Charm, etc., that went on to have great success. So that's going to be the question, along with those of you who think that he didn't get any pace pressure and that he just, catwalked his way into the Derby winner circle in the Preakness Stakes. We're going to certainly talk more about the Preakness and the probables and the possibles, as you see there, in the coming days and weeks, along with some art preview material right here at the CS Racing Report.
Authentic in front, Tisdale final try. Authentic was always in front, and he wins the Derby. Authentic, right away.